What was it, Rhodes? Azzi Fudd sucked in the NC2A tournament. Was absolute crap. And now, I'll show you in a minute. I've got 3 mock drafts up here. She's not going number 1 in 2 of the 3. All right.
Something fascinating just happened in the WNBA draft conversation. Azzi Fudd, the player ESPN literally crowned the People's Princess, is suddenly not a lock for the number 1 pick anymore. After UConn's tournament collapse, 2 out of 3 major mock drafts now have her falling to 3rd. And the fans, they're not just questioning the hype, they're obliterating it.
Awood Pham is a projected number 1 overall pick for a lot of people now out of Spain. So this is interesting. So Fudd struggled in the Final Four. She finished with 8 points on 3 of 15 shooting. In a loss, by the way. In a loss. Now you come down here in the tournament. Yikes. Aside from UConn's second game where she exploded for 34 points against Syracuse, Fudd never scored more.
Let's talk about what actually happened in the NCAA tournament. Fudd finished the championship game with 8 points on 3 of 15 shooting. That's a 20% shooting performance when her team needed her most. But here's the detail that matters. Aside from one 34-point explosion against Syracuse in the second round, she never scored more than 13 points in any tournament game. She had fewer than 10 points twice during March Madness, after only going below 10 twice the entire regular season. Translation? She dominated weak competition and disappeared against elite defenses.
Oh, before we get to the people scorching ESPN, and they scorched them, right here, CBS Sports, this is a mock draft, right there, all right? Awood Pham, number 1. Dallas Wings. Azzi Fudd. Yeah, the Storm at number 3. Sporting News. Scroll down. Basically the same picks in the same order. Fudd goes number 3. We got Yahoo Sports, and they've got Fudd going number 1 to Dallas.
Now we've got CBS Sports and Sporting News both projecting Spanish prospect Awood Pham as the number 1 pick to Dallas, pushing Fudd down to Seattle at number 3. Yahoo Sports still has Fudd going first, but that's 1 out of 3. For a player who was considered an absolute lock just 2 months ago, this is a dramatic shift, and it raises a legitimate question: how much of her projected draft position was based on actual performance versus media narrative?
Awood Pham, number 1. Dallas Wings. Azzi Fudd. Yeah, the Storm at number 3. Sporting News. Scroll down. Basically the same picks in the same order. Fudd goes number 3. We got Yahoo Sports, and they've got Fudd going number 1 to Dallas. But 2 out of the 3 now, and this was a person considered a lock by many to have been the number 1 pick in the draft. Ain't looking so hot right now.
Because here's where it gets interesting. Fudd is Paige Brooker's girlfriend, and the media agenda around that relationship has been impossible to ignore. We're talking about the same type of coverage amplification we saw with Brittany Griner, where the story became bigger than the basketball. Multiple identity checkboxes creating a media narrative that overshadowed actual on-court production. And now that the tournament exposed some real weaknesses in Fudd's game, fans are pushing back hard against that manufactured hype.
ESPN decided to put this post up. Forever the People's Princess with a crown. What? 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 Oh, wrong answer. This got obliterated by sports fans. By people, you mean UConn shippers? What? Now she can go suck some more in Dallas with passive Paige Buckethead.
When ESPN posted a photo calling Fudd "Forever the People's Princess" with a crown emoji, the response was brutal. Top comment: She did not even win a single National Player of the Year and got robbed. Sarah Strong for Player of the Tournament last year. Stop glazing her. Another one. Overrated and overhyped just like Paige. Someone else wrote, only UConn folks call her this. Everyone else knows she's just another player who happens to be Paige's girlfriend. These aren't casual fans. These are WNBA supporters who feel like the media is forcing a narrative down their throats.
Wait! She did not even win a single National Player of the Year and robbed Sarah Strong for Player of the Tournament last year. Stop glazing her. Wow. Rated and overhyped, just like Paige. Woo! Only UConn folks call her this. Everyone else knows she's just another player who happens to be Paige's girlfriend. Damn. As my boy Ben Daniel would say, damn. Okay, shots fired.
The criticism kept coming. Easy to score when you're up 28 in the fourth, won one game with adversity, and yeah, another fan. Just an overrated, always injured player that has to play with a superstar because she is not one, and this one cuts deep. Forever came up very small when her team needed her. When your own fan base is this divided on a projected top pick, that's not just noise. That's a real problem with how the player has been marketed versus how they've actually performed.
But still gotta hear this people's princess shit. I mean, wow. Wow. That, oh God. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. I don't get the hype about this girl. And I don't.
But here's the real issue facing Dallas. If they draft Fudd first overall, the Wings would be bringing in Paige Bucher's girlfriend to a Texas market that may not respond well to the type of media coverage that relationship generates. Seattle or Portland? That plays differently. But Dallas is a traditional sports market where attendance and merchandise sales matter more than progressive talking points. If the relationship becomes a bigger story than the basketball, that's a legitimate business concern for a franchise trying to build a sustainable fan base.
Considered the people's princess when she has no personality. First Paige, then Watkins, not Fudd. Please stop. They're all good players, but they're not clutch in the toughest times. Forever a choke job. Wow. Who gave her that name? Who gave her all this recognition over the last year? She's not that good. Wow. Wow. It's hilarious.
And there's another angle nobody wants to discuss. The conflict of interest inherent in WNBA relationships across team lines. You've got players dating opponents, sharing inside information about team strategies, rotations, and locker room dynamics. In any other professional league, this would be addressed in the collective bargaining agreement. But in the WNBA, it's celebrated as representation and visibility. Meanwhile, competitive integrity takes a backseat to identity politics.
Really? Yeah, I'm going to predict it because will Dallas actually have the balls to not take her with Paige there? I mean, look, there ought to be I've said one of the biggest conflicts of interest nobody talks about is the relationships in the WNBA and how they're.
So here's what we're really looking at. Azzi Fudd is a good player who had a terrible tournament at the worst possible time. Her draft stock is legitimately falling based on performance, not bias. But the media narrative around her has been so inflated, so agenda-driven, that fans are now overcorrecting in the opposite direction. They're rejecting not just the hype, but potentially undervaluing her actual skills because they're tired of having representation forced into every basketball conversation. The Dallas Wings have a genuine decision to make. Do they take the player the media has anointed, knowing that relationship drama and identity narratives will dominate coverage, or do they draft based purely on basketball ability and team fit, potentially facing accusations of bias if they pass on Fudd? This is what happens when sports media prioritizes everything except the actual sport. You create a situation where a talented player gets both overrated and underrated simultaneously, where fans can't have honest conversations about performance without being accused of prejudice, where draft decisions become political statements instead of basketball evaluations. Fudd averaged solid numbers during the regular season. She's a capable shooter with good court vision, but she's not a generational talent. She's not someone you build a franchise around, and she's definitely not the people's princess based on one ESPN social media post. The real test comes on draft night. Will Dallas have the courage to make the basketball decision, even if it contradicts the media narrative? Will they prioritize winning games over checking boxes? Because in a league that's finally starting to gain mainstream attention and revenue, every draft pick matters more than ever. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If Fudd wasn't dating Paige Buchers, if she didn't fit into multiple representation categories, would we even be having this conversation about her being a potential #1 pick? Or would she be evaluated purely on her 3 of 15 shooting performance in the championship game? The fans commenting on that ESPN post aren't wrong. They're tired of agenda-driven coverage. They want to talk about basketball, not relationships. They want to celebrate actual achievement, not manufactured narratives. And they're pushing back because they love the WNBA enough to demand better from the media that covers it. So what happens next? My prediction: Dallas takes Fudd first overall anyway. Not because she's the best player available, but because the pressure to validate the media narrative will be too strong. Because passing on her would create a firestorm of accusations that the franchise doesn't want to deal with. Because sometimes in professional sports, the path of least resistance wins out over the path of best basketball decision. But if I'm wrong, if Dallas actually drafts Alway Pham or another prospect ahead of Fudd, that would be a seismic shift. That would signal that WNBA franchises are finally prioritizing winning over media approval. That performance in big moments matters more than regular season stats against weak competition. That relationships and representation don't guarantee draft position. Either way, this draft just got a lot more interesting than anyone expected 2 months ago. And Azzi Fudd's legacy will be defined not by what ESPN calls her, but by how she responds to this adversity. Can she prove the doubters wrong? Can she become the player the hype suggested she was? Or will she be another cautionary tale about media narratives colliding with basketball reality? Tell me in the comments, should Dallas take Fudd first overall, or is it time to move on from the manufactured hype? Because this decision is going to set the tone for how the WNBA handles media narratives versus actual performance for years to come.